Hey everyone, so today we're going to learn a very important skill. I'm going to ask you to visualize that you're sitting in front of a grandmaster and you are winning the position, you are better in the position, but you imagine how much resistance you're going to face. It's going to be next to impossible to completely roll over your opponent, and the grandmaster is going to continuously provoke you into making mistake after mistake until you might make one and he might win the game anyway. We have all faced this over the board. We are completely winning, but then your opponent tries to confuse matters and they manage to create some counterplay, and then suddenly before we realize it, the opponent is basically winning. So we're going to learn that skill for ourselves. Sometimes we are going to be worse in a position and we have to find out enough complications to confuse our opponents and then even try to draw and even win the game. And we are going to learn this skill by stepping into the shoes of a master himself who managed to completely confuse his opponent and win the game. So let's begin and try to learn this very important skill. So now we're going to rush through the opening moves and then we're going to reach the critical positions. We're going to try to replicate the thought process the master had, and we're going to try and reach the same decisions that he reached in the game, and we're going to try to win the game. So let's begin. At the start, e4 was played, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, takes, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, takes, and this is all opening theory. And after e5, knight d5, knight e4, so white has placed his knight to cover up these crucial dark squares, and queen c7. So black tempts white into going f4, and then he will play queen b6, taking control of this very important diagonal. Now bishop d3, bishop a6. So black tries to exchange these light square bishops, and usually the white light square bishop is a great attacking piece, and exchanging it is a great deal for black. So a3, white prevents any sort of knight b4 and bishop b4. And now f5. Here bishop e7 would have probably been a better choice, and this is where black actually went wrong. He played f5. He was a bit over ambitious, but after takes, queen h5, and then suddenly the king has to move. And this is not really a mistake that black did not see the queen h5 check. He basically overestimated his chances and underestimated his opponent's chances in this case. And after black moved king d8, it's white to play. So here the best move for white was actually just to take on a6, queen takes a6, and then go bishop d2. And now he's going to castle on the queen side, and his rook will be pointing towards the d7 square. His queen is going to enter on f7, and this will be much better for white. However, in this position, white made the move which most of us would make, and it's very easy to see this configuration of the queen and the king being on the same diagonal, and especially when the queen is controlling the a5 square, bishop d2 is a very tempting move, and it's not a bad move at all, but maybe white had a better alternative as we discussed. Now it's black to move. You have to make a choice here. I'm suggesting you pause the video for a few minutes and try to come up with the best continuation for black. Black is slightly worse for sure. His king is stuck in the center, his pieces are not developed. White is simply threatening to castle queenside and as well as simply trap your queen. So what should black play here? How can he create enough complications so that he can have some counterplay, and then white is the one who has to make some critical decisions? It's very simple. The more decisions your opponent has to make, the more chances there are of him going wrong. So it's your move. Pause the video and think for a while. What should black play here? Okay, so of course here you can go on the defensive. You can try to move your king somewhere, you can try to move your queen, but you're losing too much time. After white even castles, his rook will be on the d file, both his bishops are perfectly placed. He can play bishop a5 and at least one of your pieces will still be on this diagonal, and queen f7 is not really an easy threat to meet anyway. So here black came up with a very interesting idea, and that is bishop takes d3. So he is sacrificing his queen, and after bishop a5 he took on c2. Now while the master was playing this game, his friends thought that he had simply blundered the queen, but that is not the case. And after rook f1, f5, simply preventing the advance f5 from white. Now bishop b6, ab6. So now we try to understand what black has got for his sacrificed queen. First of all, he has the 2 bishops. Now we all know the 2 bishops are a strong force to reckon with. Then he also has a pawn. Now you might not think that extra pawn is significant, but it actually is. One extra pawn can make a huge difference. And you can imagine the b6 pawn not being there, and then suddenly black's king is not really safe. The next thing is that white's king is very weak. It's stuck in the center. He cannot really castle on the king side. He cannot really castle on the queen side. Another thing, that the rooks don't really have any open files. Let's say the rook on f1 could magically move to f7, then suddenly it would be a very different story. White would be threatening to capture on h7 in one move, and it would be completely different. Here white's rooks don't have any open files, and it takes a long while for white's rooks to come into play. While you can imagine the black bishop on e4, the black bishop of c5, the rook going to d4, and this rook coming to g8 and even g2 or g4, and black's pieces are very active. So we try to understand that black has amazing compensation, even though objectively white might be better here, but considering that few moves back black was just clearly worse, this is a very great practical bet, because now you have the initiative. And after rook f3, white is trying to get his rook into play. King c7, rook g3, rook a4, queen f3, the f4 pawn was hanging, rook c4, rook c1, bishop d6, queen e2. After rook e4, white already felt the need to simply give back the queen, because if he plays, let's say, rook e3 here, then bishop f4, rook e4, bishop e4, the rook is attacked, rook c3, bishop h2, g3, bishop g1, and now the bishop will come back to d4 or c5, and you can imagine how difficult this position is. Let's say white were to make a random move, let's say king d1. Now imagine bishop d4, rook b3, and next you can imagine the h5 h4 coming up, and this is just disastrous for white. His king will pretty much end up being checkmated pretty soon. So white instead decided to give the queen back after rook takes c2, but black even fought for even more than the queen after bishop f4, rook g7, bishop h2, queen takes, pawn takes, rook d2, bishop d6, rook d4, c5, rook e4, king c6, b3, h5, and after a few such moves, the black bishop is in the center now, and after takes, e5, g4, rook a2, king f3, and after capturing the pawn on b3, king d5, g6, e4, and now the pawn can come to g7, but then the rook will be stuck on g8. There is no check with tempo available for white, so white tried rook b8, b4, king g4, but after king c4 he basically resigned, because there are too many pawns for white to handle, and one of these pawns will queen pretty soon, and this pawn is not really going anywhere. So this was a lesson, a very important lesson in creating counterplay. Sometimes we are worse in a position, and we can try to fight out in a passive position where we are much worse, but it's much better to try and create some complications like black did here. Even though he sacrificed the queen, but he at least forced white to come up with some very good moves, which was not easy, and it kind of creates a psychological ploy, because suddenly white is attacking and within a move he has to defend, which is not really an easy transaction for any player. And this was a very interesting bet for black, and he managed to win the game. So I hope you learned a bit about counterplay and how to create counter chances even in worse positions. And if you enjoyed the video, do like and subscribe and check out other content on the channel. We have plenty of interesting videos to choose from, and as always, do take care.